Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So about a year ago, I made this video called Skin Color in Genshin and Sumeru, and this was back before Sumeru first released. So this is like 11 months ago. You can see on the left-hand side, I have like a very clickbaity thumbnail here, like titled "Mistakes" and red question mark, where I have like Xing on the side and Kaya on the other side, and basically, yeah, they're the only characters with skin colors darker than beige white in the game at that point in time. And now we have like Candace, we have Sino. But yeah, essentially this video was made before Sumeru came out and we got all the leaks about the characters. We got like maybe 80% of the characters leaked and then people were freaking out about the skin color. And this was basically just my video talking about why I wanted different skin colors in Genshin Impact and why canonically there was no reason why we shouldn't have them. And after that, I never really talked about the cultural representation and the skin color issues again after Sumeru came out. Part of that was because I actually went to Taiwan earlier this year in January, and I stayed in Taiwan for about 3 months. And I had no good internet. I didn't have a stable internet connection. I had to play Genshin Impact on like 250 to 350 ping. So I couldn't stream and I couldn't talk about anything. And that was one of the reasons. The other reason, and I think this is going to be a bit more controversial, this is probably going to make some people mad, but this is honestly how I feel about the issue. And that's the fact that there is really not that much offensive to say about Sumeru besides the skin color stuff. Um, in fact, I think going into Sumeru with very low expectations, with a very low bar for what I was expecting in terms of cultural representation and what Hoyoverse was capable of. I just like went in there with such a low ball, you know, with such a low balled expectation for what Hoyoverse was capable of that it kind of actually exceeded my expectations for how well they portrayed Sumeru. Again, barring the skin color stuff, which is like for a lot of people a very big deal. And for me, honestly, I definitely would have wanted to see more characters with different skin colors. But in terms of the actual cultural stuff, like the cultural references, the storytelling, um, the environment, the architectural design, regarding the Arab stuff, the Iranian cultural dances, all of that stuff, the Egyptian theme, the pyramids, the gigantic tree, all of that stuff that you would like put under the umbrella of cultural references. I honestly think it wasn't bad. It was actually like I would say above average. Okay, I probably made a lot of people really mad right there, but this is backed up by some of the things that people have said on Twitter and Reddit, which is that they do like seeing their culture being represented. There is a post here that says, "I love seeing Genshin including my culture in the game." This was made 1 year ago. I'm Persian, and we have a very old artistic culture with some of the most artistic, beautiful poetries. Unfortunately, no one really knows much about it due to many things. Even some people from my own country don't pay attention to our culture. I really get excited when I see stuff from our language and culture in Genshin. For example, Ajdaha actually means dragon in Persian. It's a word used to describe mystical creatures, dragons, in an old poem book named Shanama. The guy in the Crimson Witch artifact set story named Rostam, I knew this by the way because I took Persian, I mean Farsi, back when I was in university. I knew the name Rostam. In a mythological hero from the same book, there's a cook from Sumeru in Inazuma named Parvane, which means butterfly in Persian. The NPC named Anisa Perbiruni, also a Persian name, talked about her ancestor Sage Biruni. Al Biruni is actually a real life scientist from nearly 1,000 years ago in Persia, and one that's very important to scientific discoveries of the world. The lead character named Nilu is short for the Persian name Nilufar, which means lotus water lily. These are just from the top of my head. Sumeru will definitely bring a lot more to the table, and I'm super excited for it. Persia has a really academical history, just like Sumeru, and there's a lot to take inspiration from the old Persian Empire, both visually and lore-wise. Genshin has a surprisingly large portion of Persian players. This will be an amazing experience for all of us, since I've rarely seen any mere mentions of Persian culture in the media I enjoy or the platforms I use. This is all much appreciated. And this is essentially how I felt when Yunjin came out. Maybe as not like hard as this, as emotionally as this post, but I did feel good seeing a part of Chinese culture, which I am a part of. I am Chinese, being represented. And why am I talking about this? It probably seems very random after all this time that Sumeru came out that I'm suddenly talking about this again. Well, it's because I feel like we're going in. We've come so full circle, right? We've gone from the skin color issue, which is still a real issue. I'm not saying that it's not. I still want to see more characters with different skin colors in Genshin, but we've gone so far in the other direction that I think we've given too much ammo and too much justification and probably represented Genshin in a way that is not really realistic for what Genshin actually is in terms of its like cultural properties, which is that it does actually have a lot of cultural representation in the game, both in the different regions, including the Liyue, Inazuma, Mondstadt, especially Sumeru. Most recently Sumeru. I've seen a lot of people talking about the cultural inspirations from these areas, and I don't think people acknowledge this enough that Genshin Impact is actually probably one of the most international games of all time, especially when it comes to fantasy. I don't think I've ever played another fantasy game, especially single player game. I know that there are some historical strategy games because I used to play a lot of strategy games where they have a lot of different cultures represented, but they're usually represented by different numbers, and maybe you'll have like a different sprite for the cultural head of the civilization you're playing as. Like in Civilization 6, you have like all these different cultures, but very rarely do you see different cultures represented in fantasy games. Like I've never seen Persia represented in anything besides in Genshin Impact and in Prince of Persia. And I'm not sure that Prince of Persia does a very good job of representing Persian culture. Because I remember back in the day when I was playing on PS2, they had like Prince of Persia 2, like Sands of Time, or like Prince of something something. There was like a second name. And then on the back of the box, I remember seeing this like scantily clad girl who used like a chain whip. And then she was dressed in like bikini armor. So maybe that was probably not the best representation. And I'm not saying that Nilu is like a perfect representation of Persian culture, but I think in general, probably speaking, Nilu is probably a better representation. And this is borne out by some of the things that people have said on Twitter. Like I know there's this post, cultural representation. Okay, this isn't the one. I'll go back to that later. But so this person, Gui Malv or Himeko, oh, I just noticed that their handle is Himeko, but with like an OW. They made like a humongous thread about all of the different cultural inspirations that Al-Haytham takes from, I think it's like from, I don't know what culture is, like Arab culture. And then there's like also another thread by Amir somewhere about how Nilu's dance means so much to the Iranian player base because it takes inspiration from Persian culture. So you have both of these posts responding to another post. And this is really what I want to talk about. This is kind of like an encapsulation of what I mean by we've gone so much in the other way, in the other direction from where Genshin actually is in terms of representing culture, both good and bad, that it has gone way, 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 way too far in the other direction towards the negative, to the point where, this person meets Kiryu Man is saying that Gwen Stacy from Spider-Man's Spider-Verse, the new Spider-Verse movie, is better cultural representation than anything Genshin Impact could offer, and she is a white woman. So there is a lot to unpack here, and I'm not sure I can cover all of it. But you can obviously see that there are a lot of things you could say that is wrong about this tweet. And there's a lot that goes on in terms of just like bullshit tweets. But I think this one really encapsulates what I find wrong with the Western view of Genshin Impact, which is that it's just like it's this vacuum, this void of culture. That Genshin Impact not only is it a void of like real culture in terms of its cultural representations of all the different real life places that they depict when it comes to like references, but also that it's the void of culture when it comes to gaming. That it's just like a shitty gacha game that has no value outside of preying on people and getting them to pull for more characters, which to be frank is partly true, but let's just talk about this, right? Gwen Stacy is a white woman. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that white people have no culture. White people obviously have culture, but I'm assuming that this tweet is made from an American standpoint. And when they say culture, like 90% of the time, when they say cultural representation, what they actually mean is black people, right? Culture from Africa for African representation, Afro Americans, that sort of thing is the implication when they say cultural representation. So the fact that they say Gwen Stacy is better cultural representation than anything Genshin Impact has is a pretty low bar for where they see Genshin Impact when it comes to cultural representation. Now, if this tweet was made in a vacuum, I would have said, okay, fine, you hate Genshin Impact. That is whatever. I don't care about what you think. But they're not tweeting about this in a vacuum. They're quote tweeting this. They're quote tweeting another person making a thread about the actual cultural representations in Genshin Impact. The one that I just showed you, right? This one is the exact same one as this one. So they're literally making a thread about the actual cultural references in the game, and this person is like, "What? No. The Gwen Stacy has more culture than any of these other cultural references that you might have had. You know, fucking who cares about Al Haytham's cultural references to Arab culture, to um, Hassan ibn Al Haytham, the actual real person who he takes his name from. You know, fuck that. I like Gwen Stacy more. And sure, she's hot, but why would somebody make a tweet like this? That's a very dumb question because people just tweet bullshit all the time on Twitter. But why do people feel so okay with just insulting Genshin Impact? Why is it that it's so accepted? This is actually something I've been thinking about for the last few months or so, because now that Genshin Impact's popularity has died down a bit, actually it's died down probably like 75 to 50 to like 75%. It does feel like people feel more comfortable with criticizing Genshin Impact, especially when they're like actual players who used to be former players of Genshin Impact, and then they just feel like it's okay to say a bunch of random nonsense about it that is not true. Even if Genshin Impact does not have very good representation for darker skinned characters, that is not the same thing as saying it has no cultural representation at all. More so, cultural representation for like white people, because let's be honest, even if we're talking about comparisons between white culture with white cultures, Genshin Impact still has more of that. We literally have an entire region based on Central Europe, and then another region coming up that is based on France and Britain, and then we're going to have another region called Snezhnaya that is going to be based on Eastern Europe and Russia. So that's like three different variations of white culture or European culture. And what exactly does Gwen Stacy represent? I don't know because I have not watched the second movie. I've watched the first Spider-Man, Spider-Verse movie, and I thought it was very good. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the Spider-Verse. I like Miles Morales. I think he is a great character. I think Gwen Stacy is amazing. But can you actually make like a one-to-one comparison between these two cultural properties in Genshin Impact and Spider-Verse? It's nonsense. And then you have obviously this person also responded. I'm sorry to tell you that, but comparing a white girl that isn't really wearing any cultural clothes sounds almost racist. You're saying a white girl in spider suit is better cultural representation than an Arab man with references to Islamic golden age. Do you hear yourself? Yeah, and that's just I'm trying to figure out why somebody would feel okay to say this and then get like 1,776 likes. Why would people agree with this? Because in the current cultural zeitgeist, it's okay to hate Genshin Impact without any thought whatsoever. They're not making any critical, not making any real logical, rational, critical statements about Genshin Impact other than that's just that they hate Genshin Impact. You know, you don't have to talk about how the cultural representation in Genshin Impact actually works. You probably don't even play the game. You don't know anything about the game. And then you just say bullshit about how endgame works, about how this game is just preying on people with characters, about all of this nonsense that doesn't really get borne out when you actually play the game. Like, a lot of people complain about the characters themselves and how it's really gated by the gacha system, which is true, but then they don't talk. talk or say anything about the artifact system because they don't know anything about that because they don't play the game. So it just feels kind of half-assed. Like, of course you're going to talk about the characters because that's what's in every single gacha game. It's a tired and really rote, mundane, banal criticism to make about Genshin that literally anybody can make about any other gacha game. It's not interesting. This tweet is not interesting, but this tweet is indicative of where I think we are when it comes to like mainstream discussion about Genshin Impact, which is that it's just this game with like characters that have really, really fan servicey characters and female characters that are meant to make you, simp for them, which is again true, but it's just not interesting. All right, so moving on, I've already talked about the Nilu references, yeah. I thought this one was also really interesting, which is that it's not really interesting, but interesting to me in how it shows what people think about Genshin Impact, which is that cultural representation in Genshin, the game with 5 black people. Again, I want to emphasize I want more characters with different skin colors in Genshin Impact. But this is a very American viewpoint that this tweet is putting out, which is that cultural representation is synonymous with having black people. That is not the case. You can have cultural representation of Chinese culture, Japanese culture, Iranian culture, Arab culture, um, Indian culture, Egyptian culture, without having black people. There are overlaps in degrees of where that might, collide with each other, and then it becomes something that we might have to talk about. For example, when I first made my first video about skin color in Genshin and Sumeru, I think that was an appropriate time to talk about it, and there will definitely be more occasions in the future for me to talk about this issue as well when Natlan comes out. In fact, there are already leaks about Natlan that I find, if it's true, then there's going to be stuff to talk about. Because, well, let's just get it out of the way. One of the leaks said that a lot of Natlan characters are going to be darker in skin tone. In fact, I think like one of the leaks said that most of them would be like black, but this is like the Chinese version of black, which means that they're probably going to have the same skin tone as probably like Kaya or Candace, which is just slightly darker than beige white. So we might have to talk about that later on when Natlan comes out in a year's time. Who knows? But that's for the future. But that's still not the same thing as cultural representation. It's just such an American view on things, and I am so tired of seeing this kind of mentality. We don't we don't exist in a world of binaries where if it doesn't have black people, then it doesn't have any cultural representation at all. The tons of movies, tons of games that are considered very good in terms of cultural representation do not have Chinese people in them or do not have Asian characters as protagonists or Iranians as protagonists. But we don't call them movies without cultural representation. That's nonsense. And again, I've read this tweet as well. I think this was a very good tweet. And obviously that's borne out by some of the people, some of the other tweets. This isn't even a tweet, this is a Reddit post. But I just called it a tweet because I've been Twitter brainwashed. So yeah, a lot of people love this stuff. Like this tweet got 13.9 thousand likes. This one got like 1,500. This one got 30,000. There's obviously a lot of people who agree with this kind of mindset, and there are also a lot of people who agree with this tweet or think it's funny. There's also the possibility that this tweet is like just a joke, but I've never liked the argument that something that is objectionable or is just like plain outright fucking stupid is a joke. That's just whatever. That's just what everybody says when they made a mistake and said, "Oops, I guess you don't like what I said. I guess you think what I said is stupid. It's just a joke, man. It's just a joke." And the reason why I don't think it matters is that this is essentially what everybody does when they talk about Genshin Impact. They have no knowledge of Genshin Impact as a game because they don't actually play it. So, if you're going to make criticism of something, at least play the game to an extent where you can make judgments about the game that are relevant to your experience. Not just base your just not just base your tweet or your opinion on something that you saw about a meme you saw on Twitter or Reddit. Right. Yeah, there's also another one just 16 days ago. Yunjing's design appreciation post. Not only is her design unique and culturally inspired, but also managed to be attractive and elegant without having to follow the typical Genshin waifu design formula. Yeah, that's also one of the reasons why I like Yunjing, which is that she doesn't really show that much skin. Like there's like maybe there's a bit of here that is also covered by like this. I don't know what this is. I actually don't know what the fabric is called, but essentially it's not very revealing while also looking good at the same time. And obviously she has her Chinese opera stuff going for her, so that's another point of cultural representation. Natlan, of course, is this. It seems to be inspired by pre-Columbian or indigenous America with additional influences from Spanish and West African cultures. One of the characters revealed for it is called Yansan, and according to this wiki here, Yansan is based on Orisha or Oya Yansan Yan. Yansa is a deity in Yoruba mythology as well as Afro-Latin American traditional religions such as Candomblé or Santeria. There is a lot that can be said about the skin color issue here. Like obviously Yoruba people, as I've mentioned in my video about a year ago, are like black people. And she is obviously not black, but that doesn't mean the culture is not represented. But we can make judgments about that culture without saying that Genshin does not have culture or has worse cultural representation um than a character who is frankly not even the main protagonist, who is not black, who is not, any different from 99% of the characters in Genshin Impact when it comes to skin color, or can quantifiably be said has more culture or better culture than the characters in Genshin. We can't really say that this is better. It's just some nonsense that people made up because they hate Genshin Impact. Yeah, that's basically all I have to say for like. There's so much unneeded and needless hatred for Genshin Impact these days. It's really weird. I know that it's probably just like a minority opinion that it gets um that gets expanded and like enlarged by tweets or whatever, but it's so annoying. Just make up your mind after you play the game. Anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out. I'll see you guys later.